I would say in a nutshell, I've lived on the Isle of Man coming up to now 5 years. And the main reason why I actually came here was midway through writing my first PhD thesis. I started to write the first book of a 9 book science fiction series where this young scientist, essentially me, discovers a long lost organism, and together they become the world's first next generation human. And the scientist actually leaves England and comes to the Isle of Man for protection because there are forces that were at his home that were trying to essentially possess him for all of this power. And he then comes to the Isle of Man, and from the island really connects with the environment, the people, and ends up developing a futuristic jurisdiction from the island. And so a lot of my inspiration came from the book. And so I had never really been to the island. I just started writing about it and got here and fell in love with it.
So why here? Why here? Where did that come from in the first place?
The book. I have no idea other than just the concept that I was writing, and I'm pretty sure at some place in the back of my mind there would have been this amazing connection to the island, but I think that that's yet to have really fully been to be seen. But at that particular point, I didn't know. I got here and I fell in love with this island, and I fell in love with the Castle Mona. And so I started writing a second thesis on the architectural theory and history of one of the most precious buildings on the Isle of Man, and actually put in several attempts to purchase the building. And that was over the past 4 years, and consistent work, surveys done on the building, surveys done on the landscape, as well as a whole in-depth history of the Isle of Man between the years of 1760 to around 1830 that really shaped our concept of what the Isle of Man is today in modern times. And I felt that it was going to be very important to have a huge grasp of information and knowledge on how the Isle of Man became what we today know it as. And prior to 1765, it was not this British crown dependency or this outpost that it's currently I feel being used as. If I'm perfectly honest, the Isle of Man has been colonized, and it's not just because I'm an American saying that. It's also for the fact that you look at it by any other definition of the term. There's a history here. There's a language. There's not even X, I believe, in the Vannan language, yet we're called Manx. Who called us that? These types of things are very important, and I write about quite a few of these things in my thesis. But then also I talk a lot about them at conferences and workshops and just different lectures and events that I do here on the Isle of Man.
So that's a bit about you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Let's fast forward, and you've just gone public with your intention to run for the Legislative Council on the Isle of Man. Why does that role appeal?
Well, an election for MHKs typically happen every 5 years in the form of a general election. And from 2016, when the first election had occurred right after Brexit, there was this lead up time where so many different challenges politically and globally have occurred. And there are not too many additional or new voices that I believe have been added into the mix of the Tinwood institution. And of course, there's a very big difference in the roles between an MHK and an MLC. Currently, by various members that are currently in the Keys, they believe that the members of the House of Keys have a democratically elected mandate and are therefore able to originate policy based upon that mandate. The thing that really concerns me is that less than 50% of the actual voting population voted in that election. And it's one of the challenges that I think that, from a justification standpoint, saying that they are the only people with a mandate when you have 11 members that are, a legislative council, which also have a purpose, within the policy process. The main scope of people in the legislative council is oversight and scrutiny of policy. Yet I do believe that they have a mission and a responsibility to the island from an island-wide component versus where MHKs are elected by specific constituencies and they have to listen to those specific constituencies. I think that there's a true opportunity in being a member of the Legislative Council if you are a person of an international background like myself that's able to inform policy based upon an island-wide mandate versus something that is just done by one specific constituency.
You've spoken quite a lot there about what's in it for the island, if you like, from your
Yes.
potential appointment. What's in it for you? Why is it interesting from your point of view?
I believe it's because I care. I really care for the island. I love the people that are here. I've never felt more at home anywhere else. And I believe that the Isle of Man has always been historically important. And for the mission that I feel I have, which is to challenge global institutions over the mismanagement of how we live on the planet and the decrease within resources, within the humanitarian rights, I take them very personally because a person of my background is not necessarily largely listened to in society. And I think that that's a very important message. And I've always been empowered and encouraged by the friendships and the relationships I've built on the Isle of Man with so many amazing people that are forward thinking, that want to see innovation happen. And they encourage me to continue to go on. So there's a part of what it is that I'm doing, which is very selfless, which is that I've been asked by several members of the public, HM, what can you actually do? We know you're King of Mauritii, we know you're HM, but what can you actually do to see or to begin to start building on this wonderful vision that you have? And I believe that running for Legislative Council gives me that opportunity to best represent not only the individual people of the Isle of Man, but to bring a much more international mandate to the conversation that's happening in the Keys.
But why Legco and why not Keys? And what do you think you could be doing through that role specifically, which is going to impact some of these changes?
Now, I have a very interdisciplinary academic background. A part of that is actually environmental policy. And with the UNESCO Man and Biosphere status that the Isle of Man currently has, there's not a single member within the House of Keys at this very moment that has that specific background. And I feel that we do need a level of scrutiny applied to legislation that's able to incorporate the various stakeholders and institutions which make up UNESCO Man and Biosphere, as well as the global international institutions which have been speaking about this for the past 30, 40 years.
But those skills would be, you could argue, more useful in Keys, where you can be sort of generating the policy rather than scrutinizing the work of other people.
In some ways, yes. I feel that scrutiny shouldn't be underestimated. With scrutiny, one is able to take a more objective position. You're then able to see what aspects of a person's, or specifically an MHK in this situation's ideas or strategies can then be seen from a different perspective and then applied to a much wider demographic of people on the island. I still feel that, running for MHA, if that's something I have to do, I'm not ruling it out. There are a lot of MHKs at the moment that have a tremendous prejudice against people that move between both houses, but I don't necessarily believe that's an issue. Being an MHK, being an MLC, both are part of the Legislative Council. They're two distinct roles, which I completely understand, but those roles have not been clearly defined by the incumbent members within them. And I believe that now we have to show the focus of that to the people and let the people now reinterpret what they feel and what they believe these roles are here to do. That's a part of the reason why I'm actually sitting here. I feel that as it currently stands, I would not get the support at all in the Keys. When I ran in 2018 or asked to be nominated in 2018 for the position, I only had a handful of MHKs actually take the time to sit down and meet with me. And I do believe that part of that is the reason that the Keys are pretty much overwhelmed with the responsibilities that have been placed upon them. So as the Keys actually increase within powers, increase within responsibilities, the Legislative Council, people begin to get a bit more confused as to what their role is. What are they here to do? What's the function? And I feel that the only way that we can define that is with the appropriate people that go into that role and help to transform it into something that the people can understand. I don't think that it's going to happen from, a person that's currently or incumbent saying, this is what I do. I think that the entire process now has to be opened up, made, available to the people so they can see the challenges. For so long, this process of having 24 people, elect the 11 individuals which are in the legislative council currently there, it's a bit obscure and outdated, and it does need to be opened up. And this concept of having a democratically elected legislative council, I feel, is imperative if we are to survive with democracy in the 21st century.
We'll come back to that in a bit. You've mentioned that you've tried to go for Legco before.
Yes.
Why do you think your chances have improved this time round?
I feel because during this particular time, I have a much larger lead up. The election will be in February, hopefully, of 2020. And that gives me about 6 months time to meet with each and every one of the MHKs. It gives me time to speak to the general public and to invite them in on my specific journey of trying to get to this particular point.
Have you met with some MHKs already?
I have. I've met with a number of them already. Some of them are sticking with their concept that, I'd just be a better MHK, and or that I would find the keys, or not the keys, but the legislative council boring. And I kind of felt that as an insult. It's kind of like telling a person that you think doesn't fit the profile image-wise of what it is that you want to see them as, that you don't really want this. And I think that that's an old tactic that's been used by people for discrimination and inequality for centuries.
You'd certainly be one of the younger members of Tynwald.
Yes.
I think that's fair to say, or youngest,
yeah,
even.
I would be the youngest. I actually turn 29 on Tuesday. So, yeah.
Happy birthday
Thank
for them.
you.
Do you think that stands you in good stead?
I think it does, with the specific rising and very disappointed demographic of the population here on the island. I mean, if you look at the numbers, more than 26% of the island's population is under the age of 18. You can vote on the island at the age of 16. So there's an entire population of people that are impacted currently by policies coming out of the Keys that are being scrutinized by LegCo that have zero representation at all in the government.
So do you think young people are underserved, maybe?
Oh, 100%. There's no doubt about it. And I think that if you're looking at the current situation, by not having these representations, it's not just young people. I feel that, the LGBT community isn't represented. There's not a single member in government that is of the LGBTQ community, or has actually stated it. There's not a single member in government right now that is non-British born. There's not a person that looks like me. And so I feel that the process to Tynwald for many years has largely been unwelcoming to anyone that has not fit a specific image. And so there are people that say, what is he harping on about now? Why is this such a problem? I do believe that, and, if I must say it, there is a washing of what we believe the identity is of the Isle of Man. It is an internationally, historically powerful and significant country. And I do not want to underestimate that at any point within any election. So every election is important. And just having an election where I can come in every 5 years is just simply inappropriate for democracy.
If you don't mind me playing devil's advocate a
Sure.
little, you've made some claims in the past in the public arena which haven't necessarily come to fruition, or not yet, maybe. Why should people listen, and why should people take your policies seriously?
That's a very good question. I feel that for a lot of people living in today's age, just because something doesn't happen overnight doesn't mean that it's not important. Not every idea is going to work, and I won't get things right all the time. I'm not a perfect person. I don't excel at every single thing. If that were the case, I think the world would be slightly different. But I am not a person that's going to get every number, every statistic, every statement 100% correct. One thing I can do is I am a great listener, I feel. My great grandmother, when I was quite little, she used to tell me the good Lord gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So you can listen as twice as much as you speak. And I'm a bit hard-headed sometimes with it, but I try the best to listen to everyone that I'm around, because I believe that 75% of every single argument that you have with people is simply because they don't feel that they were heard. So I want to go into this, conversation knowing that I've not done everything to the standard or to the basis that a lot of people may have done it, but I'm me and they are them. I have my own journey to walk in this, but I'm also open to understanding that I have a lot to learn. I have a lot to go through. I have a lot to develop. For a lot of the people there, I'm the very first person to fall on the sword and say, you know what? I accept the culpability. And that responsibility and accountability that I feel that I could bring to the table, I don't believe a single member within Tenwold is ready to admit. And that's saying a lot. And I have tremendous respect for every single person that has decided to run for office and to support a specific initiative. But you look at situations such as the prom, guess what? That's someone else's fault. You look at the challenges that you face with the steam packet, that's someone else's fault. The problem that we have, the massive number of people leaving the island, that's someone else's fault. I'm tired of blaming people. It's time that people stood up, accepted accountability, and said, look, you know what? I may not have been the direct reason of the problem, but guess what? By me not doing something and being part of the solution, I am therefore the problem. My previous plans, whether they be with the Castle Mona, had other challenges associated to it, which were outside of my control. Were they within a realm of influence? Yes. And do I believe it's over? I don't believe that any of this stuff is over at all. I think that certain great ideas, revolutionary ideas, and bold and bright ideas take time, and they take a lot of patience. And that's one thing I believe I have in bucket loads.
What specific things would you want to see changed? Do you have a manifesto? Do you have policies that you would like to see implemented?
The big thing from the basis of a political party that I would like to introduce to the Isle of Man is that it would not be a simple or single manifesto. I feel that the Isle of Man extraordinarily is ineffectively run based upon the lack of prior planning. So I believe that the Isle of Man needs a master plan which encompasses the entire 13 by 33 and then the additional sea miles that belong to this territory.
But a manifesto is exactly that. It is prior planning, isn't it?
In pieces. I'm specifically talking about a physical plan. I want to see zoning. I want to see mixed use territory. I want to see a plan where Douglas is not the only place where people can go in order to watch a film or have a good night out. I want to see the investment and the prosperity and the regeneration of this island be island wide. And I think that that's a massive difference to a lot of the different things that came out in the 2016 election. We saw a large number of the candidates within their manifesto virtually copy and paste speak about the importance of the capital. I'm not sure that a centralized capital works effectively for the Isle of Man, and this is something to consider. Secondly, I believe that we have to reconsider the structure of Tenwold. We're due this time to see something very different. Part of the reason of me being here on August the 2nd, which is, no doubt about it, is the anniversary of the birth of one of the island's most famous political reformers, James Brown, who challenged the House of Keys, which was at that point self-appointed, and was able to essentially dictate the terms and the quality of life of people here on the island without having a democratically elected mandate. And I feel that by not allowing a people's vote within the MLC element to take place, even by applying public pressure through the MHKs, is disastrous. And it's not fair at all. I mean, the Isle of Man didn't have the right to vote in Brexit. You don't get the right to vote for an MLC. Well, what do you get the right to vote for? Because I've not been educated on that. And if it means that we have to wait another 2 years in order to actually get a vote from the people, I believe that to be a great injustice to democracy itself and the values that the Isle of Man claims to hold on the international stage.
You're a self-styled monarch. You are born outside Britain. You represent the LGBTQ community. You represent kind of ethnic minorities. That, taken as a package, if you like, that eccentricity, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way, how is that going to be received by MHKs, do you think? And have people been receptive so far?
The way it was received the first time was complete and utter shock. I don't believe that they ever considered or factored in an individual such as myself running. But for the very fact that I did, and I I feel not appropriately treated through the process is a wake-up call for the island overall. And like you said, I have a myriad of different factors and features that don't necessarily or traditionally pop up within the Manx political system.
Do you think that's been too much for MHKs, perhaps?
Whether or not it's too much is irrelevant. I feel that it's their public duty. Not every single thing that you get across your desk as an MHK, you're going to be prepared for. And I feel that with all of the challenges that we're seeing, that the backlash over racism, sexism, misogyny, xenophobia from Brexit, it's going to hit the Isle of Man if it has not already. As a person of color, I've actually experienced challenges here on the island, not in a massive, overwhelming component, but I've had statements made to me, such as, you're the king of Bongo Bongo land, you little sash boy, with coming over here to try to interact with the politics. Things like that have been stated on forums or have been said to me in public. Not to say that that is the general consensus amongst MHKs, but I believe that it requires people to be brave. It requires to have, it requires bravery to sit down across from someone that may not look like you, that may not share the same views as you do, and may not support the same legislation that you support. And I think that I'm a credit to the definition of democracy by sitting in that room, by not being of the same background, the same position of a lot of people, simply putting myself forward. I'm doing it because I believe it's the right thing to do. It's not that much that I have to personally gain, if I'm honest in that way. I just believe it's the right thing to do, and not everything that's the right thing to do is going to get you the right support or the right encouragement. But I believe it should happen, so that's why I'm doing it.
You've certainly got thicker skin than me. But, just finally, I want to come back to talking about the process behind electing the Legislative Council. You've mentioned that it's not something which is voted in by the demographic.
Yes.
You could argue it's kind of like, I don't know, secondary democracy or whatever, with it being MHKs voting it in. Would you like to see that changed?
100%. I do believe that with political changes happening at a global scale the way that they are, a refactoring, a reimagining of how the structure of Tinwood works is fundamentally necessary.
But that was looked at when we had the
Liz
Vane report and recommendations which came out of that. And here we are.
Again, I feel that just because we have someone developing a report, even with this new climate change emergency action team that's been formed by the administrations and government at the moment, there is no guarantee, there's no obligation that the keys have to listen. There's no obligation that MLCs have to listen. There's no obligation at all for there to be any consideration past just going through the motions. And I largely feel that that's one of the challenges that the Isle of Man government, the incumbent government, will have to answer to and justify to the people. This has gone on too long. I'm not in opposition to a single member of government. I'm not trying to hone in and say, look, this is that person's problem, or, it needs to be changed from the top. Profoundly, the structure's not been able to accommodate a person of color in over 1,000-year history in a written history of the Isle of Man. So therefore, if we are to revolutionize ourselves and change as a democratically elected system over the next 1,000 years, then we need to reconsider the structure, and we need to actually analyze and figure out if that's actually going to work for us. One of the big pieces too with the MLC position is the fact that it has been silenced for too long. I feel that a lot of the incumbents were and this is, back last year, were told at the very beginning that they should, be quiet, that they should, not try to govern, because they're not government. Their job is to sit back and just to scrutinize the legislation. And I do believe that that's an important role, that you have to be objective, yet at the same time, that role is dictated and defined by unique persons.
But you've got quite big ideas.
Yes.
Would you be satisfied by the limitations of that role, do you think?
I don't believe anyone can be satisfied with any role. I think we evolve over time within certain positions. That's why we grow. That's why we develop. That's why we move. That's why I don't have a prejudice between people that move between both houses. I'm not linked specifically to MLC or MHK. I believe that I can execute both tasks credibly. I've had, letters of recommendation from the former Secretariat of Man and Biosphere under UNESCO. I've had recommendations from, former government ministers of this island, and they all believe that I am best suited for this, for this specific task. That being said, I feel that that credibility was not listened to at all with regards to the very first election. And if that were the case, then what level of merit was I being assessed by? When it came to my email and my displeasure at how the process was working with the relevant parties involved over the election, I was told that, if there was any reticence to my candidacy, it's because I'm the sovereign of another nation. And like you said, this self-styled thing, it's well within my right, to say that I am a monarch of a futuristic jurisdiction that is dedicated to this planet's future. And that amount of responsibility and accountability, no sane person would do so lightly. I make that step as a commitment to every future generation of the human species because we owe it to them, not because it's this ego boost. And there are so many people that can sit back and critique, but then I pose the question back to them, what are you actually doing and how are you in the place to say that I'm not able to say this or do this? And it goes out to every single person that's trying to discredit it. I have an academic background. What do they have? What types of papers have they written? How many lectures or workshops have they given? How many countries have they been to? Have they actually left the island? Not to say that this isn't, not to say that this is a prerequisite, but this is very important if you're expecting to see any changes within the future. But this is a very challenging concept to speak about. It's littered with so many different emotional and almost nationalistic feelings about what the reception of someone like me would be. But if that conversation was ever going to happen, I believe it's going to happen now because there's so much unprecedented, unpredictable scenarios that are going to happen pre and post October the 31st for Britain and the world. But the most important thing here is the fact that I feel people have seen my undying loyalty, the fact that if I'm hit, I keep coming back up. I don't stop just because, it's a little uncomfortable. I hang in the battle. And that's one thing that people can guarantee out of me. Just because something gets discomforting or uncomfortable in any means doesn't mean that I'm going to abandon what I believe should happen. I'm going to hang in that conversation with them and try to find some resolve.